Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Masechta Zevachim daf Kuf Yud Aleph. We are going to begin on Kuf Yud Amud Beis by the words Tanu Rabbanan. So, before we continue with the Gemara, let's remind ourselves of the Mishnah that we saw yesterday. Hazark mixas dam b'chutz. If a person would sprinkle even a small amount of dam outside, namely even matana achas, even though when it comes to, for example, chatas panimius, which we said you need to do all the zrikas and all of it is ma'akev. When it comes to the chatas chitzainis, one is sufficient, but the point is you're going to be chayiv. Rabbi Eliezer says, afa menasech me'echag b'chag b'chutz chayiv. You're also going to be chayiv if a person will do the nisoch hamayim, the water libation during Sukkot outside, and you did it for that, you did it b'chutz, then you're going to be chayiv. Rabbi Nechemia Omer shiri hadam shehikrivan b'chutz chayiv. We'll get to that. So says the Gemara, Tanaban, Hamenasech shloishes lugin mayim b'chag b'chutz chayiv. So if a person will take 3 lugin of water on the holiday of Sukkot and they do it b'chutz, so it says they'll be chayiv. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon Omer, im molen l'shem chag chayiv. If you fill it up for the sake of the holiday, then you are chayiv. Now, this seems to be saying the exact same thing as what the Mishnah said, that af hamanasech me hachag b'chag b'chutz. So, my b'nai, so Rav Nachman Yitzchak b'yeshir b'mayim kemifagi. So, let's go straight into Rashi. So, according to the Tanakama, it says who was menasech 3 lugin, specifically Dish B'chalal Masaymana. Within 200 is 100. V'yafa gav demlinhu b'kli gadol. Even if, let's say, you used a much larger kli, k'dshinhu kli, it's still mekadesh. De'in shir l'mehag chag l'mala. The whole idea of nisach hamayim, it cannot be less than 3, but it can be more. V'yasa Rabbi Eliezer l'meimar v'hu shemilon l'shem chag. He actually says that no, it has to be done for the sake of the sukkahs. So, according to him, you're only be chayiv in the event that you do exactly 3. But if you do more than that, then according to this opinion, you will be pater. So that's one answer to question 9. Hamanasech gimel lugin mayim b'chag b'chutz chayiv b'lezo omer imon l'shem chag chayiv. So what is the din? So whether yesh shir l'mayim, it has to be 3 or even more than 3 would be chayiv. That's answer number 1. Rav Papa Omer, Rav Papa gives an alternative answer in Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph, which I believe actually we saw this in yesterday's daf as well, but it's okay. As a review, B'kir b'nesachim b'midbar k'mifagi. The question is, were you makriv nesachim in the midbar? V'ina Omer b'mlam denisach hamayim menisach hayayin pligi. So, okay. So, let's understand these other disputes. So, first of all, did we have nesachim in the midbar? What is that referring to? Says Rashi, Devayu isahu yeshir mayim. It has to be 3 and not more. Therefore, v'chimolu tvei lo kadshinu kli. So what's the machlok? Because Tanakama says, Del machayev lo boy bin nesocheha kedushas kli l'chayev l'ein b'chutz. You don't need to have a kedushas kli in order to be able to sanctify this water to be chayev b'chutz. T'ksaber kirbu nesachim b'ol moyed shebamidbar kol 40 shana. That we actually were makriv nesachim all 40 years, and therefore during those 40 years there was no ability for kedushas kli. Says Rashi, bama katana shel kol yachid te'unin nesachim, b'kivan demimos yachid te'unin nesachim, v'hasam kli sharas leika. There was no kli. So b'chutz nami mechayev alayhu b'shas iser habamos b'lo kiddush kli. So therefore you can be chayev also without kiddush kli, because there was no kiddush kli in the midbar. So according to this opinion, hoyu b'shas heter habamos kariven b'lo kedushas kli, because as we said that they were makriv nesachim in the midbar even without kedushas kli. So therefore you're chayev also b'chutz without kedushas kli. Okay. And then Ravina says, the question is, do you learn one from the other? Says Rashi, and therefore technically the din is that you could be mekat. You can still be chayiv even like kedushas kli. However, miu b'nisach hayayin, when it comes to nisach hayayin, ashkachan b'nisach hamayim or ashkachan, right? We only find this concept by nisach hayayin. We don't find this by nisach hayayin. The chayva sibor hein v'lo kirbu ella b'boma sibor b'kli sharis. Okay. The Tanakh Masavar Lamida nisach hamayim and nisach hayayin l'chayev b'chutz. The filu kitchu b'kli. So, however, that's because we learned it out from Nisach HaYayin, but who says that we can apply Nisach HaMayim to Nisach HaYayin? Okay, so that's basically the other answer. And then again, the other din was question 9 is boy Kiddush Kli Pligi. Okay, so let's continue now with the next piece of Gemara. So, Tanoban, Hamanasach Shloisha Lugin Yayin B'chutz Chayev. So, as we said, that if a person does Nisach HaYayin of 3 lugin outside, before we're talking about mayim, who's nisach hayayin, you're chayiv. Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shimon Omer, v'hu shekidshan. It has to be that this wine was sanctified. So, what does it mean? It has to be sanctified with kli. So it needs kli sharis. So my binah. So Omer Rabada bar Rabbi Yitzchak baritsui midos ikabinayu. When it comes to the liquid, it's just floating on top of the kli. That is the machloka. Says Rashi. Machitsaf, what flows or floats, al svasa kli, v'tirvayu kedushas kli bo. Really, they all need kedushas kli. Miu, rabbanan savi, savri, birutse midos, shalach niskachu. That it could even be sanctified by the liquid that was on the top. Rabbi Lezer savar, l'niskachu v'toich kli b'inan. It's only that which goes on in the inside, as we'll see much later on Masechtas Menachos. Okay, so that's one explanation. Rabba Bereid Rabba Aimer Kirban Nesachim Bama Ikabanayu, whether or not we were makriv on a bama, which is Rashi says the Tanakama lo boy kedushas kli. Kirban Nesachim B'midbar Kamefaki, as we said before, that kedaprecious, as Rashi says, because it's all totally, if we were brought in the Sachim in the Midbar, there was no Kedushas, there was no Kli Sharis, there's no Kedushas Kli. And therefore, because of that, so too, B'chutz, you're still chayiv even though there's no Kedushas Kli. Fine. Ubapulta Dahani Tanoi, the Sanya, Bamas Yachid, when it comes to the Bama of a Yachid, Enu Sricha Nesachim, Rabbi. It does not require nesachim. However, when it comes to a bamas yachid, it's a machlokas whether or not you need nesachim. Says Rashi. So how is this the same machlokas? Ein nesachim b'bama katana. He's saying there's no such thing as nesachim in a small bama katana. Hilkach lo ashka nisach b'lo kiddush. You could bring in the sachim on a bamas yachid, right? So it's basically sounds like the same thing, whether or not you need a kli sharis. Fine. So v'hani tanoi kihani tanoi. The sanya ki savoi, when you come into Eretz Yisrael, it's requiring only once you enter into Eretz Yisrael and you have a Bama Gedola, that's when the Sachim are brought. Maybe even by a private Bama also the Sachim are brought. Which is referring to Rabbi Shmuel, only a Baba Gedola, which is for everybody, that requires Nesachim, but not a Baba Katana. Rabbi Kiva Omer, Kisavai, that pasuk is Lati'ina Nesachim B'Baba Katana Kasmadaber. No, it actually is referring to a Baba Katana. 1 second. Ato Omer, Baba Katana, when a Baba Gedola. Maybe it's referring to a big Baba. So Kisho Omer, El Eretz Moshe Seichem, Hari B'Bama, Hanoi Hegas B'chol Moshavas HaKasmadaber. The fact that it says Eretz Moshe Seichem, in your dwelling place, it sounds like bama, which can be anywhere, not a specific location, which is the bama gedola, but rather it's in multiple places, which sounds therefore like a bama katana. So kishatim saloimer, when you think about it, again, that's good for the machlokas, whether or not the nesachim were brought in the midbar. Okay, and therefore, because of that, whether or not you would also be chayiv b'chutz. Nechemi oimer shiri hadam shekrivan b'chutz chayiv. Even when it comes to the leftover blood, that also, if you were makriv that blood outside, you're chayiv. So the question is why it's not ma'akev. Why would it be chayiv? So Rav Yochanan, Taner of Nechemi Kedibri Ha'omer Shirai Ma'akvin. No, this actually is proof that actually the Shiraim are Ma'akev. So Meisvei Rav Nechemi Omer Shirai Hadam Sheik Ribim B'chutz Chayiv. Omer B'kiva 1 second. V'lo Shirai Hadam Shirai Mitzvahem. It's only a mitzvah, so it's not Ma'akev. So you shouldn't be chayiv. So Amalo Ivarim Pedarim. When it comes to the fats and the limbs, shehin shiri mitzvah, those are also considered to be shiri mitzvah. Nonetheless, even though that's true, you're still chayiv for that. So it's not necessarily because it's ma'akev, it's that we see elsewhere, just like by the Avarim Hadarim, that you're chayiv b'chutz also. So lo, he said, one second, lo. The reason why you're chayiv b'chutz by that, shein tchilas avoida, because that is actually the beginning of an avoda. It's like the end, like an afterthought. So if it was really true that you could just say it's ma'akev, right? Why don't we answer that? It must be that he does not hold it shirim and not ma'akev. Tiyuftus, a good case. The whole machlokus is referring to the shiraim of the inner karbanos, chatois. When it comes to the leftovers of the carbon on the outside, that certainly is not ma'akev. The whole question is, when it comes to chatas panimis, is the dam ma'akev? Because as we said, that every dam application is ma'akev when it comes to the chatas panimis. So therefore, maybe that's only there. Do we say that the leftover dam is also ma'akev? Mashen, when it comes to the dam in the chitzaina, so there you only have to do one blood application. So all the other dam is not ma'akev. So certainly the shiraim shouldn't be ma'akev. Kikam Rav Nechemia be mishiraim hapanim. He says no, that he was actually speaking about the shiraim panimin. So kitanya hahi b'shiraim hachitzainim. And when he mentioned the shiri mitzvah, that's shiri chitzainim. So basically what he's saying is like this. This actually could be the answer. That maybe it's ma'akev specifically referring to the chatas panimis, the leftovers. However, the chatas chitzaina, that's what is shiri mitzvah. Rabbi Kiva lo yada my kamer Rav Nechemia who savar Rav Nechemia shiraim chitzainim omer v'kama hadule shiraim chitzainim Rav Nechemia l'davar Rabbi Kiva kamer. Okay. So going back just for a second before we talked about Rabbi Kiva Shita, Rabbi Kiva only said that only once we're in Eretz Yisrael, even on a private bama, is requiring nesachim, but in the midbar, there was nesachim for bama gedoyel in the midbar. Okay, let's look at question 10. Shiri hadam shekriven b'chutz him chayev. So in shirim hapanimim is machlokas, but chitzainim everyone will hold you are potter. Everyone will hold you are potter. Okay. Okay, let's keep going. Okay. So let's see the next Mishnah. Hamoylik es ha'of bifnim. Now you're supposed to do malika on an oaf, not shchita. It's got to be malika, and it was done bifnim. So the first process was done properly, and therefore it makes sense. Therefore, v'hel b'chutz chayiv. Now, if you take the sacrificial parts and you bring them outside, you're going to be chayiv. So that makes sense. However, if you're molk b'chutz, if you do the malika outside, that's not allowed because you can't do, the only place you can do malika is bifnim, as Rashi says, nevelahi shein malika el bifnim lefikach pater al ha'alato. Therefore, halal b'chutz pater. Since the only time you can do malika is inside, so if you did malika outside, so they're not going to be chayav for ha'ala. And also hashaychid es oif bifnim vel b'chutz pater. You're also going to be pater because there's no such thing as shchita bifnim by an oath. So for that same reason, if you did shchita bifnim and then you took the sacrificial parts and did it outside, so then you're going to be pater for the same logic, because the first act basically made it so it's no longer good. So therefore, afterwards, it's not you're not going to be chayiv for b'chutz. All right, so let's continue to Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Beis. So the Mishnah continues and says, Shacha b'chutz, which again you took an oath. It wasn't supposed to be b'fnim, but b'chutz, but it was b'chutz. But you did it was shchita, and shchita b'chutz for an oath makes sense. But all b'chutz chayiv. So it makes sense. You're going to be chayiv for the also on the Allah, not just for the shchita. Now nimsa, what do we find? Derech hachshiru b'fnim. The way to kasher an oath b'fnim, which is through malika, is paturu b'chutz. That will pater you b'chutz. In other words, if you did the malika outside, so then you're going to be pater because you can't do the malika outside. For that matter, derech hachshiru b'chutz, which is shchita, patur b'fnim. So if you did the shchita b'fnim, that will also pater you from the ha'ala afterwards. Now Shimon Omer, kol shechayev l'el b'chutz. Anytime you are chayev outside, chayevin al kiyotze bo b'fnim. You're going to be chayev similarly inside. Sha'oila b'chutz chutz min ha'sheichet b'fnim umal b'chutz. Okay, we'll understand this last line in a second. Let's just finish up. Look at this Rashi over here. It says the kol shemischayev al shchitas b'chutz. Let's say you're chayev for shchita outside. Im chazar. Let's say if you went back for ola, then you brought it in and out. Ohu o acher chayiv. So that's what it means. Sha'ol b'chutz, chutz min ha'sheichet, bifnim umal b'chutz. Okay. Says the Gemara, ha hechshiru chayuvahu. So the Gemara asks, what exactly does this mean? You're chayiv. So tani chayuvoi. So when it says hechshiroi, what does it mean? Derech hachshira, the way of making it kosher, right? It's a chiyuv. It's the way you're obligated to do this, the malika inside and the shchita outside. Okay, Rav Shimon Omer v'chul. So ahecha koi. What is he going on? What exactly is the statement of Rav Shimon? And again, what is he referring to? Kol shechayav ala b'chutz, chayav ala kiyotze bo b'fnim. Okay, so ilema reishakoi hamoylikoi bifnim. You did malika inside, which you're supposed to do, va'ela b'chutz, and then you brought the sacrificial parts outside. So chayiv, that makes sense. Molek b'chutz, and we said if you did malika outside, which doesn't work, va'ela b'chutz pater. Yermali Rav Shimon says, ki heichi difnim chayiv, just like when you did the malika inside, you're going to be chayiv for halal afterwards. So b'chutz nami mechayiv. Now that's hard to understand, but that's maybe what he's saying, that if you do the malika b'chutz, you're still going to be chayiv on ha'ala b'chutz. So hi kol shechayav ala b'chutz, kol shechayav ala b'fnim eboile. El ki heichi de b'chutz loy mechayiv. Just like we said, if you did malika outside, you're not going to be chayiv. B'fnim nami lo chayiv. Then maybe it means that also if you do malika b'fnim, you're not going to be chayiv. So hi kol she'in chayav ala b'chutz miboile. Ella asefakoi. Hasheichet oif b'fnim. You shech the bird inside, which you're supposed to do malika, ala b'chutz, and then you sacrifice it outside, pater. Shach b'chutz, which is the right way of doing it, you shech it outside, ala b'chutz chayiv. Then you would be chayiv. The Yermali Rav Shimon ki heichi de b'fnim lo mechayiv, just like if you'd have done the shechita inside, you're not going to be chayiv. So b'chutz nami lo mechayiv. So also if you did the shechita b'chutz, you're not going to be chayiv. So hai kol she'in chayavin riboyle. El ki heichen b'chutz mechayavin mifnim, just like your chay the b'chutz mechayiv mifnim mechayiv. So mifnim nami mechayiv. Hat ktani chutz min sheicha mifnim v'hamal b'chutz. It excludes as not someone who shechs mifnim. So Omer Ziri shchitas behema b'layla ikminayu. The whole question is if you do the shchita at night. V'hachi kamer v'chein hasheichet behema b'fnim b'layla. So too, if a person would shecht an animal at night, so at least you did the shchita properly b'fnim, but it wasn't done at the right time. So ha'al b'chutz pater. So in that case, you're going to be pater because even though you did shchita, but you did of a behema, but it was done at night. So therefore, it's not a proper shchita, and therefore you're not going to be chayiv for ha'ala. Shacha b'chutz b'layla ha'ala b'chutz chayiv. If you did shchita outside at night, then you would be chayiv. For Shimon Omer, no. Kol shechayavin ala b'chutz. If you're chayiv outside chayavin al kiyotzeba b'fnim. V'ha'ala b'chutz, and chutz min ha'sheichet oif b'fnim v'ha'ala b'chutz. Okay, so again, answer number one is the nafkamina if you did the shechita of a behema at night, whether or not, since you did it at the wrong time, are you going to be pater or not? Okay. Rabbi Omer kabol b'kli choyel yikbenayu. We actually had these two machloikas elsewhere. So if you're makabel the kli choyel, b'hachikamer b'chein hamakabel b'kli choyel b'fnim b'el b'chutz pater, because after all you have to be makabel in a kli sharis, not in a kli choyel, and therefore that matter hamakabel b'kli choyel b'chutz, which is okay because it's outside. B'el b'chutz chayiv. Rav Shimon Omer kosher chayiv el b'chutz. Anytime you're chayiv outside, chayavin al kiyotzebo b'fnim, then similarly you'll be chayiv inside. So therefore, when it comes to a kli choyel outside your chayiv, so too kiyotzebo b'fnim you would also be chayiv. V'al b'chutz chutz min ha'sheichet oif b'fnim v'al b'chutz. So v'hashta the tani Avu Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Which is the right thing to do, but then you did the wrong thing by bringing it out. Chayiv molech b'chutz, which you're not allowed to do malika outside. B'chutz pater. Rav Shimon mechayiv. Now Rav Shimon says you're chayiv in this case, even though you did malika b'chutz. Now Rav Shimon hasam koi v'tani kol shechayavnu b'fnim v'al b'chutz chayavnu b'chutz. Okay, we're gonna stop there, but let's just unpack this a little bit more. With some questions. Question 11. We're going to hold off. That's going to be later on. Question TA1. Hamoilik oif bifnim, which is correct. V'al b'chutz, and then you did the ha'ala outside, so you're going to be chayiv on that. Omolek b'chutz, which you're not supposed to do. V'al b'chutz. Him chayiv maskana. So, as we said, if you do the malika inside properly, and then you do the hala b'chutz, everyone holds you're going to be chayiv. However, if you did malika b'chutz, that is the machlokas, whether or not you're going to be chayiv. The Rabbanan say you'll be pater, because you're not supposed to do malika outside. However, Shimon says you will be chayiv. Okay. Fine. Question TB 3. Rabbi Lezer denu chayav b'chutz el b'kuloi ma din behiza matana achas shel panimius b'chutz umadua. According to Rabbi Lezer, is that what we had over here? Let's see. According to Rabbi Lezer, denu chayav b'chutz el b'kuloi. Oh, so this is we already had this a while. Ma din behiza matana achas shel panimius b'chutz umadua. So basically, we said that when it comes to chatas panimis, right? I wrote whatever I wrote over here. So by chatas panimis, right? We know that it's ma'akev. All the sprinkling applications. Okay. Question 4. Shiri dam shekrivin b'chutz im chayv l'maskana mazeh tolui. Shiri dam shemakrivin b'chutz im chayv. So, I wrote machlokas im shirayim akvin v'zeh b'fnim avol b'chutz divrei hakol potter. I think that's the right answer, straight up. I think straight up that's the right answer. I think. So do I have an answer key over here? I wish I did. TB5. Hifrish techatoy sachrayas adkan.